can't think of anything worse than losing a child. A previous guest on the show, award-winning actor Jason Watkins, talked on this podcast about losing his 2.5-year-old daughter Maudie to sepsis. The pain must be unbearable. Child Bereavement UK is a quite brilliant charity that supports children, young people, parents and families when either a child grieves or a child dies. For the last 3 years, my daughters and I have had the privilege of singing at their annual carol concert in December, and the outpouring of thanks from parents and families about how child bereavement has supported them and continues to support them in the worst of all circumstances is truly humbling, moving, and inspiring. If you know of someone in these circumstances who needs their help, or if you'd like to support the work that they do, either by donating or giving your time, please contact them via their website, www.childbereavementuk.org. Every penny and every effort will make a difference. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Bandwidth Conversations, a podcast that finds out about the stories and journeys of artists, performers and rock stars of life. If you've watched Phantom of the Opera, Barnum, Aspects of Love, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Bad Out of Hell, Sunset Boulevard, and most other major West End shows, my guest today probably will have been a key contributor. My guest is a conductor, composer, musical director, and pianist. He has written a number of musicals and has worked closely with Andrew Lloyd Webber, Michael Crawford, Sarah Brightman, Tommy Steele, Donny Osmond, to name but a few. He has worked with most of the UK's leading orchestras, and he's worked in film, radio, and television, as well as live theatre. I'm looking forward to hearing how he saved Phantom, some of the highs and lows of his career, and what happened when the conducting baton flew out of his hand. I've just watched him in concert, which was a joy to behold. 2 concerts actually now. And I'm thrilled to be talking today to Mike Reid. Mike, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for asking me, Katie.
2 Saturdays ago, you hosted an evening with Mike Reid and friends at St Paul's Church in Grove Park. I kind of knew you'd had this glittering career, but I had church evening in my mind. To my surprise, when I walked in and where everyone's usually is queuing up for communion, there's not 1 but 2 grand pianos. And then we had this incredible evening where it was your reminiscences of your career coupled with your astonishing piano playing, and then together with that, uber talented friends who were also playing or singing with you. There was a performance worthy of the Albert Hall, which I know you've played as well. Last night, we had the carols at the Weir, which you and Sonia Jones and Joanna organised. So I'm feeling very privileged that I get to see you 3 times in a month. You were so kind to play the piano for my daughters and me, and it did feel a bit like sort of Beethoven playing for Bucks Fizz or something. You come from a very musical family. Your mother loved classical music, and your father, I think I'm right in saying, was sales manager for Paramount Pictures. And he introduced Hollywood musicals into the mix. And your great-grandmother was Florrie Robina. Is that how you say her name?
Yeah.
And she was a musical hall artist in the 1880s and was known as the English Rose. How did music feature in your home as you were growing up?
My father used to bring back soundtracks from films. And I remember especially Half a Sixpence was a soundtrack he brought back, which was a Paramount picture with Tommy Steele. And I loved it. I must have been 11 or 12 or something there. And I played this over and over again and thought, oh, I'd love to meet the composer. I'd love to meet Tommy. Literally about 8 years later or less, I was working with them both in different capacities, really. That and Oh, What a Lovely War was another one, musical film, which Paramount did, which again, I absolutely loved and fascinated by the orchestrations and the songs. So he definitely inspired that whole thing about film. My mother's side was more classical. She loved musicals. I remember her playing Gigi and West Side Story and Kismet. And I was sort of immersed with this music and absolutely loved it. And her mother was quite a good pianist, and her aunt taught piano at Cheltenham's Ladies' Colleges. My dad's side, his family really went back to Providence, Rhode Island. And there were a whole load of actors and artists. In fact, 2 of his great-great-uncles performed in Barnum and Bailey's circus.
Oh,
I
my
found out,
goodness.
Sadly, since he didn't know about this, because when he was here alive, we didn't have things like Ancestry. You could find out all these things about your past, which you couldn't do 20 years ago without having to spend a fortune going through public records. So it's quite interesting. So looking back A lot of artists go back to the 1800s with his side of the family.
Wow. And how old were you when you started to play the piano?
I was 8.
What did Danny the Milkman have to
Danny
do
the Milkman.
with your piano playing?
Danny the Milkman was our milkman. He was a really nice guy. My mum always used to have meetings with Danny the Milkman and our porter every day. She used to have coffee. It was like, obviously, it was on the round. So around about 10 o'clock, they would come in. When I decided I wanted to play the piano, my parents used to go to a pub called The Star, which was a pub in St John's Wood, where a lot of the cricketers always used to go, very close to Lord's. They were getting rid of a piano. My dad said, well, we'll take that off your hands. So he got Danny the Milkman to pick it up.
On his float?
On his float that arrived in style outside my window and arrived one day with my Danny and a few of his mates helping to cart it in. But this piano, unfortunately, was a pub piano which had been used and used and used. So my dad decided, okay, I'm going to get Steinways to come and, of course, get the best to come and tune it. It was hysterical. So they came along, and after about an hour and a half or so, the guy said, well, I've done my real best to get it somewhere near in tune, but I'm afraid I can't get all the cigarette butts out because they're wedged into strings.
Which presumably does not help the sound.
They're popping these cigarette butts in. So I had that for about 6 months. It was a really big old thing. It really didn't sound so great. But I used to play it all the time. I loved it. And then when I started taking piano lessons from a wonderful lady called Doris Davies, who I owe so much to, my dad said, okay, we're going to get something a little bit better. So he got me a beautiful Kemble overstrung piano, which I still have, actually. That's the story of Danny the Milkman.
Doris Davis, what was it that Doris did? You reached grade 8 by the age of 12?
12, yeah.
So you started at 8 and you went through all the grades in 4 years.
Yeah.
Which is, I would have thought, almost impossible.
I was very impatient. I wanted to kind of run before I could walk, really. I hated doing scales. But for your grades, you have to do basic scales. So she would give me pieces which had the scales I needed to learn in them. She was quite clever. I didn't think I was doing scales, but all of a sudden I was playing these Bach pieces and Chopin and things like that, gradually getting more and more difficult. And she was amazing. I mean, she wasn't a great pianist herself, but my goodness, she was an incredible teacher. She was so kind and so musical. And I used to love going to go and see her, although sometimes she would make me do things and I'd get really upset and I'd storm out. I don't want to do this. And I'd storm out and she'd phone my mum. So Mike stormed out again. He's on his way home. And then I'd have to ring up and have my tail to her and go back and end up painting one of her bathrooms or doing some penance for being so impetuous and things. She really guided me through it. I didn't do grade 1, skipped grade 1, went straight to grade 2. And then basically we did 2 exams a year. And I loved playing the piano because I would just go back home and we had a very good library. And I used to go every week and get music out of the library and read through things. So I've always been a good sight reader, which has helped me a lot in my career. At college, I was accompanying singers and playing for the opera school and always had that ability. Someone could say, oh, can you play this? And they'd put the music in front of me. And normally I could find my way through it.
Would you say you're more of a sight reader or an auditory player?
I'm definitely a sight reader. I love studying, but I also play a lot by ear as well. I can hear. But that's when I first started playing the piano. I used to kind of pick things up. That's always stayed with me. I can hear something and then play it up to a point. But it's always nice to have the music in front of you. I love playing chamber music. If you're a good sight reader, you're always kind of popular for chamber music because people just love reading things through and getting Mozart piano quartets or some Schumann piano quartet and just say, okay, let's just read this through. And if you've got like-minded string players who say, yeah, which I'm lucky enough to have friends with Ben and Bear Chapel who are playing the concert every day. We have a trio together and we love just playing through stuff and saying, okay, we'll work on that. Sight reading's always helped me a lot.
At the age of 16, you auditioned in front of pianist Angus Morrison at the Royal College of Music in London, and you were given a place, so you left school early. I wondered what were the conversations at home, whether you should pursue academics a little bit further
Well, I went
not.
to Malvern College. I had a wonderful teacher there, was called Leonard Blake. He left after about my second year, and for the final year, because I was only there 3 years, I had a wonderful countertenor who was head of music there called Charles Blake. And then I had Eunice Purcell, who was my piano teacher, who was a celloist and a pianist. She studied with Angus Morrison. We had this discussion, basically, where they said, well, listen, you could either go somewhere like Cambridge or Oxford, I could be an organ scholar, or if you want to be a pianist, we suggest you go straight to the Royal College of Music because we've gone as far as we can teach you here at Malvern on the piano. There's either academic or piano. I just wanted to play the piano, so there was no choice really. I was absolutely going to go to the college. So Eunice introduced me to her teacher, Angus. One of his things he did was to put the Valkyrie of Wagner in front of me to sight read.
To sight read?
Yes. He got the score out and said, okay, well, let's see how your sight reading is.
Oh, my goodness.
So I just kind of stormed through the Valkyrie. We kind of hit it off, and he liked the way I played and felt he would love to work with me. He endorsed me to go to the college. So I was there for 5 years, studying with him.
Was it in the 1970s you were there? What was life like there?
I had absolutely the best time. And Angus always realised this, that I was very gregarious. I loved getting involved in all aspects of music. I did conducting classes, so I put on concerts. I arranged concerts at the college. I was head of the students' union, so I got involved in that side of things, putting on stuff with the students and working with other colleges around. And then I also did lots of chamber music, and I got involved. They started a new course for me in the opera school.
They started it for you?
Yeah, because I wanted to do an opera course. They said, well, we haven't got one. So I said, well, could we find one? And they said, yeah, okay, well, we'll create one. And so I used to, with a wonderful guy called Richard Austin, who used to conduct a lot of opera, especially in the 40s and 50s. Every week we would work through an opera, talk through it and play through it. And then I'd also play in the opera school, play for rehearsal. So that was a route I nearly went down. I would love to have done, but then I got sidetracked when I got asked to play piano rehearsals for West Side Story. And then my life changed, really. I suddenly kind of felt that was my vocation. I just loved being in musicals, which I felt so at home in. Then I just carried on in that route and said goodbye to opera, which is sad. I look back and kind of think, if I could have done that again, would I? It would have been nice to have been in, because I love opera so much. And then somebody said to me, oh, we'd love you to come and conduct Hansel and Gretel or Carmen or La Boheme or something. I would probably do it for nothing. And I've done a lot of classical concerts. In fact, I started the series off, which was the Albert Hall with Raymond Govey. And we always had a tenor and a baritone or a singer. And we always did excerpts from opera and from ballet and that. I could go back to my roots a little bit in that, which I loved.
You were still at the college when you got the job playing the piano for West Side Story. How did that come about?
That came about through my harmony professor. He basically said to me, I've been asked to be a musical director of West Side Story, I think the tour which Bill Kenwright was doing. And he said to me, would you be interested in playing rehearsals? I thought, yeah, great. I always did kind of summer jobs and then I tried to get some money doing something. And I thought, well, actually, I'm going to be paid just to play the piano. That sounds terrific. So I did it, did all the rehearsals for it. And then it went on tour. Then occasionally I would dip in if they needed a piano player. So I kept in touch with them. They asked me then when they came into London, they said, would I go and play in the orchestra and rehearse it again for London? So I said, yeah, absolutely. So then I ended up playing. So this is about my third year at college, I think then. The conductor, after about 2 months, was offered a very good job somewhere else and decided to leave. And that's when Bill Kenwright said to me, Mike, would you take over? I said, yeah, love to. That sounds great. I took over. That was the start of it, really. Somebody came in from Harold Fielding's office and said, Harold, would love you to do show work with him. Would you come and meet him? And then I ended up doing Hans Andersen with Tommy Steele.
The conducting, that was a 34-piece orchestra. You were 18 years old?
18, 19, yeah.
Was that daunting in any way? Because suddenly you've gone from the pianist. But I guess you were doing that at college already.
In those days, you just took everything in your stride. I did so much. And I guess I was somewhat fearless in those days. Gloriously.
Such a great way to be.
The music was in my body, really, because my mum played it incessantly. I mean, she absolutely loved West Side Story. It was her favourite album. And we didn't have so many records. So, it was either Kismet, My Fair Lady, or West Side Story, or Gigi. I knew the music backwards, really. So when it came to do it, it was just like, oh my God, it's like an old friend here. It was absolutely wonderful. And it was a great production. We had some really good cast with the original Jerome Robbins choreography. At those days, if you did West Side Story, you had to conform, you had to get the set approved. That had to be like the original set. And the dancing had to be the original Jerome Robbins dancing if you wanted to get a license to do it in London.
Oh, really?
It's changed not so long ago, but up to about 15 years ago, maybe 20, you had to use Jerome Robbins' choreography. It was just wonderful because that choreography was something else. Absolutely brilliant. And it just inspired me so much doing that musical to cut my teeth on a show which was 34 musicians in the pit or something like that. It was fantastic. And they were all great musicians and quite strong characters. And I had to learn a lot.
And mostly older than you. So you're having to be
I think I
telling
was
them
one of
what
the
to
youngest
do.
ever. I mean, the musical directors then. So most of them, I guess, were in their 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
So they see this young whippersnapper in front of them trying to get control. There were some real characters. There was one character, and they all remain absolutely nameless, but there was one character who used to roll up his joints right in front of me in the pit. Some of the string players used to bring in tinnies of beer, and they would hit every now and again. And the brass players used to sneak out, and all this was going on, and they'd all be doing stuff. And I think, well, okay, I'll deal with that. Or you can't do that, and you must stop that. Then Bill said, Mike, I have to have a chat with you. I went, oh, Lord, this is it. All started so well.
And it's over.
My career's going to be
already.
over. So I went to see Bill, and Bill said, like, I have to have a chat with you. One of the audience has complained. I went, oh, my God, what about? It could be several things. It could be drinking beer, rolling joints, talking, going in and out the pit, or whatever. He said, what if the audience saw a musician writing in his diary? I said, that's shocking, Bill. Really shocking. I will put an end to that straight away. And I thought, goodness, I've got away with that one. I think then spoke to the band and said, listen, I'm not going to take the rap for all this. You guys have to really behave. And actually, they stood up to that. So they go, okay, sorry, we've been a bit out of order. Taught me a lot, really.
Baptism by fire. So then you move on and start working with Tommy Steele, which must have been just amazing, having had sort of always admired him. But you've done lots with Tommy, haven't you?
Done a lot with him. I did Singing in the Rain with Tommy. We did Hans Andersen in London, and then we went on tour with it. We went to Bristol and Manchester. And during that period, Tom and I wrote a musical together called Now Crusader. So that was really wonderful. When we were on tour, we found a studio where we could actually record it.
Wow, so that's busy times. You're touring and recording and writing.
He found this studio, if I remember rightly. It was just outside Birmingham. We were then playing in Bristol. And we'd go back to the studio. So we'd finish at night at 11, jump in the car, drive to a studio, which was about an hour away, hour and a half away, record until about 4 in the morning.
Oh, my.
Maybe 4 or 5. And then have a bit of a rest, get up the next day, and then get back. And one day I remember, because I had my car, which was like a clapped out Hillman or something like that, and Tom had his wonderful Mercedes. And I said, I'm a bit worried about my car, Tom. And he said, oh, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. I'm sure you'll get it. I said, I'm not sure, Tom, it will be, but anyhow. It's okay, it's working. As soon as we got on the motorway after rehearsal, we had to get back from a matinee. I could hear the car. Oh, no. So I had to pull in. If I managed to get to a garage thing and pull in, so I knew I was going to be late for the matinee. I thought, what do I do? In those days, you didn't have mobile phones. This was like 1976. So I tried and leave a message at the theatre. It's going to be a bit late. I had an assistant there.
And you were conducting?
I was conducting, meant to be there. So I roll up about 20 minutes late. And Tom was a great prankster. I was having jokes. And I walked, trying to be really kind of, I think, no one will notice me now. And Tommy's up there and he's doing Thumbelina, Thumbelina, tiny little thing, one of the songs from Hans Andersen. He said, oh my goodness, he said, Thumbelina. He said, this little thing is a bit like a musician. He said, like a conductor. In fact, it's just like, you could see that, that's our conductor. And he's just coming in to join us. And he's coming in, he's quite late. He has a really dodgy car, which is bright enough. And all you can see all 1,500 people in this theatre. And suddenly, all of a sudden, I can feel my blood going into my face. I tried to be so subtle coming in that nobody would know.
Totally busted.
Yeah. He's great to work with. And we see each other sometimes and meet up for lunch. We did a concert when Bill, sadly, who passed away earlier in the year. He had his 50 years in the business thing on Radio 2, and Tom was performing then. So we worked together again. The first time we worked together in years, that was about 6-7 years ago. Always a joy. It's always an energy. It's always fun.
You've done so many different things in your career, so we're only going to be able to scratch the surface, which is a real shame, actually. Musicals, to start off with. You've conducted over 20 West End musicals. So that includes Phantom, Barnum, Aspects of Love, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Whistle Down the Wind, Singing in the Rain, Sunset Boulevard. You worked a lot with Michael Crawford as well. First time you worked together was on Barnum, when he
played. We worked together
played.
on Barnum. We did it in town, and then he went on tour, and I supervised the tour, and then it came back into town again. Yeah, I worked with him for about 4 or 5 years on that show.
And that show won so many awards, including Tony Award for Best Musical and for the 1980 Broadway production, 3 Olivier Awards the following year in London, Best New Musical, Outstanding Achievement in a Musical for its staging, and Michael Crawford won Best Actor in a Musical for his performance. When you're the musical director, what does that actually mean?
I'm responsible for the daily running of the show, conducting it, keeping the standards up, rehearsing people, understudies, covers have to learn all their music. So I'll be responsible for making sure that everybody knew their stuff so they could go on. If a principal performer was off, doing warm-ups, scheduling the orchestra. Of course, the orchestras in the West End can take time off within reason. So you have to make sure that they have substitutes, we call them depths, come in and it can be seamless. So we have to make sure that that system works. You can't have too many on at any time. So it's basically looking after the show as well as conducting it. I would normally conduct 8 shows a week. Those days I would conduct probably 7.
Wow.
And have an assistant who, funny enough, I'm meeting for lunch. That's where I'm going.
Oh, that's where you're going in after here.
To go and meet him and his wife, Richard Inatovich and Carol, yeah. And Richard Inatovich, he was my assistant on many, many shows. And Barnum was one of them.
And Michael Crawford, he's the most brilliant performer. But I did read that he wasn't the easiest person necessarily to deal with. How did you find him?
I had no problems with him in Barnum at all. They were peripheral little things. He could get very frustrated if there's noise, or if he feels that people are not working with him, or if he feels that somebody is not doing what he is expected to do. And understandable. He's the star of the show. He's quite right. But I'll never forget, after one performance, he got really fed up and said, right, Mike, I'm going to have a word with the whole company tomorrow. I'm going to say that I'm absolutely tired of people talking in the wings and not concentrating. And I said, oh, quite right. You definitely say this. So the next day, I'm not sure if you saw Barnum, but
I didn't see Barnum, sadly.
Basically, you had the stage, and then behind the stage, in like a bandstand of musicians, like a semicircle, all in view, with a curtain which came down occasionally. But even when the curtain came down, you could still see through it. And so Michael had made this announcement: I don't want to hear any noise. I want to be absolutely quiet and real concentration. And all of a sudden, there's this quietest scene in the whole show, with Michael talking to Charity Barnum, his wife, doing this lovely scene. Behind, I've got my drummer, who's right in the centre in front of me, and a guitarist to my right, who had not seen eye to eye all week. He was a depth guitarist who was writing these notes saying, oh, hope if I come back again, you might be able to play in time. No. All of a sudden, this drummer stands up and he gets up now and he's about to try and thump this guitarist, and forgetting that there are 2,500 people who are watching the show. And not only that, it's in the quietest moment of the whole show. And I said, just sit down and you be quiet. And things were kind of moving like this, and the curtain was going like, I thought, oh, Lord. So I thought, well,
my gosh, that's so stressful for you.
I know. So I thought, well, I'll go in the interval, I'll go and see Michael and just see. So I go and knock on the door, expecting to get a real serious ticking off. What were you thinking? What was going on behind there? After he's made this announcement over the tannoy before the first half, I thought, well, I'll just go and see what happens. So I go in there and I said, how's the show going, Michael? Is it good? Oh, he said, I'm so glad I made that announcement. He said, at last, he said, people are concentrating and there's silence on the stage. Lord, thank goodness. He was facing the front and not seeing the carnage, which was what was going on behind him. Goodness knows how he didn't hear it. I thought, wow, got away with that one, really.
You never told him?
Never told him to this day. Until now, unless he listens to this, I'll expect a phone call.
That's brilliant.
40 years later, nearly.
You were also the international music supervisor for many of Andrew Lloyd Webber's musicals, and he had been asking you, and you'd never been free to do anything up until this certain point. And then he had this new musical that he said it needed to be saved, and he asked you to do it, and you did have some time, and you saved it, and that was Phantom. How did that happen, and how did you save it?
Well, I don't know about saving it, but I certainly came and did what he wanted me to do with it. He'd asked me to do a couple of shows beforehand. I'd met with him, I knew him, but I was working a lot with Harold Fielding, who I had first called to. I wasn't really free until Andrew rang up. They'd already started rehearsals on Phantom, and he rang me up and said, Mike, this time, please do this for me. I need you to come and conduct Phantom. So I literally went in. I was a little bit undercover because I was in there and I couldn't really say anything because it was a difficult situation, because the guy who was conducting Phantom at that time was still doing rehearsals and nothing had been really said. So I had to go in just like, oh, I'm just coming in, just a friend of Andrew's, just having a listen and things. And all of a sudden it was announced that actually Mike's going to come in. And then they asked me to conduct to step in pretty well immediately and take over rehearsals, take over the preview shows and conduct them, and then the opening night.
What was off about it?
Andrew he's a very passionate musician, very, very good with energy and knowing when energy is needed in the show. And he just felt Phantom is a tricky show because you need to be reasonably classical to conduct it, because a lot of it is quite classical, really, with the ballets and the operas and all that. But it needs to have a real musical theatre passion as well. My training was classical, but I had a very strong musical theatre. He'd seen me do lots of shows and things. And he just felt that he needed to have somebody who could really impassion his music, really bring it to life. Phantom, the conductor, is paramount in that show, more than any other show I know in many ways, because if you take it too slow, it can be, oh, Lord. But if you take it too fast, it's really horrible. You've got to find those moments where you're doing the Love Duet, All I Ask of You, or Music of the Night. You've got to be able to give a little, take a little, and move it forwards, give it some energy, and then let it really breathe for the passionate moments. He just knew that I could do that. And then when I did it, he was really happy and said, thank you. This is what we needed. And he was super happy with it. I ended up conducting the opening night and then conducting the cast album, the original cast album.
It's been the longest running show in Broadway and the second longest one in the West End.
It was an amazing team. Gillian Lynn, Hal Prince, all top of their game. But everyone worked together with Gilly's kind of Degas choreography and Hal's incredible eyes as a director. And I think it was a great combination then with Cameron Mackintosh and Andrew working together from the producing side as well. It was absolutely thrilling. Everything just came together at the right time. And I think it really was. The opening night, up to the opening, it wasn't a surefire hit. It wasn't sold out. The opening just went like a rocket. And I remember the critics the next day just kind of went, this is amazing, 5-star reviews. And then the rest is absolute history.
Well, that's been so exciting for all of you.
It was. I think it's a great show. It has everything in it. Beautiful melodies, drama, beautiful looks, great choreography.
Yeah, it's very special. That was the start then of you working very closely with Andrew Lloyd Webber for, was it 12 years?
Yeah, so that was 86. And I carried on working, well, really up through the 90s. Yeah, it's maybe a bit longer, all in all. He asked me when I left Phantom, because they wanted me to supervise it and stay on with it. But I said, no, that was the last show I did, conducting every night. So I did it for 9 months as a contract and said, no, that's it. So that I left it as musical supervision to somebody else. And then Andrew asked if I would head up his music department, which he had just created. I did that for a couple of years, which was wonderful. I was rubbish at the business side of it, but I had a wonderful Catherine Endicott who used to run everything for me and is still a very dear friend and keep everything in order while I was swanning around the world, conducting concerts and overseeing productions in America or in Germany or in Austria or all over the place. And it was a real privilege. I got to work with Andrew on so many things and developing new shows like Aspects of Love, like Whistle Down the Wind, the new production of Joseph. They were really working from the ground up, developing these shows and going and staying with Andrew in France on Aspects of Love and him discussing the show and playing stuff to me. It was a real privilege.
And he is a genius.
He is.
What is his genius?
He has a genius at writing tunes. We all know that. They're real earworm tunes. Hear it once and it sticks. I mean, he's passionate about Richard Rodgers and Hammerstein, and he studied their musicals especially. And Richard Rodgers was
He's the Sound
very,
of
very
Music.
clever.
He wrote the Sound of Music, didn't he?
Sound of Music, Carousel, King and I, all those ones, South Pacific. They're very clever scores because Richard Rodgers always used to introduce themes into his musicals at a very early age. So a song which would appear much later in the first act or in the second act, but first of all, it would be in the overture, then it would be in underscores, and it would just always be bubbling. And then you'd hear it. But by the time you hear it, you kind of feel it's an old friend.
Oh, yeah, that's really clever.
It's very clever. So it's such strong themes, like Andrew's. And Andrew does the same thing. He introduces a lot of themes and keeps things going through. You really feel you've known these songs for ages, like old friends. And that's one of the things which he's brilliant at. He's also very brilliant at construction. He has a real good feeling for when music should come in, when you don't need it. So you use it to the maximum effect, like when you're scoring a movie. He works with very good people, collaborators, great lyrics, a lot with Charlie Hart and Don Black, when I was working with him, who are wonderful people to work with and really good colleagues. And that's really important. He had amazing people like Hal Prince directing, or Trevor Nunn directing Aspects of Love. Top draw people. He produced top draw products.
That's interesting you talk Richard Rodgers with our mutual wonderful friend, Sonia Jones, who is the reason we're talking today. Recently, we were with another friend of ours, Sarah Mason, and we were singing Sound of Music songs. We knew every word. We even knew when Maria sighs. And I actually hadn't thought about why is that until you just explained that you have those songs that appear.
Little fragments sometimes,
yes.
yeah.
So that really just catches you without you knowing.
Well, all the underscores, when there's dialogue going on, you have this beautiful, in some ways you shouldn't really notice it, but you do. It's kind of subliminal. You do pick up on the themes which are going on underneath. And that's so important, not just to do generic underscore. You need to be careful. I've used that to great use in all the things I've done. And the shows I've put together, I'm an absolute stickler. And I always quote Andrew and say, no, we have to use this theme and we need music here. But the Sound of Music is wonderful. I never tire of seeing it. I think that and Lawrence of Arabia and Gone with the Wind.
Yes.
If they're on at Christmas, I will sit and watch it. I was lucky enough to work with Julie on a film called Victor Victoria. And she was another icon. When I saw Sound of Music, I thought I'd love to work with her. Ended up through my friend Leslie Brickus working on Victor Victoria and doing all the dance arrangements and routining all the songs with Julie. It was an absolute joy.
Was she easy to work with?
Oh, totally easy, just adorable. She was so, so nice and so kind and so talented and so up for trying things. I had to work with her on a number. I'm not sure if you know Victor Victoria, but there's a number called The Jazz Hot. And I knew that she had this ability to do like a 4-octave glissando right from a very low note to a ridiculously high note. So I built it into the song so she could do it. And it was great. She was up for trying all these things. It was just sheer joy working with her.
Well, you do have a reputation for bringing out the best in performers. One of your many attributes. Is there anything consciously that you do, or is it just the way that you are, you think?
In my job, we have to audition people, and you don't have that much time. And especially when you're auditioning for lead roles, you have to appraise the situation quite quickly. And someone is going to be in a room for maybe 10 minutes initially. And in that 10 minutes, you have to kind of assess, do they have the range? Are they the right type, the right energy? Do they have the technique to be able to deal with things? Do they have the right sound in their voice? So you have to make very quick decisions. And then you come back for the next round, another round probably before me. But if I hear something in somebody and I know the potential, I'm never satisfied until I reach that potential. And I can say to people, I've heard you. You can go better than that. You can go higher. You can sing louder. You can sing richer. You can sing quicker. Oh, I'm not sure. Yes, you can. So I will always, without intimidating anybody, hopefully, or without making people feel they're inadequate, I would never try and push somebody if I knew they couldn't do it. If they can't do it, then they probably wouldn't get the job. I wouldn't want to do that because it's not fair. I love it when someone suddenly goes, oh my goodness. And we had that with Bat Out of Hell. We were talking about it last night, actually, with Sharon Sexton was saying, oh, you said to me once, she and Rob Fowler, who played the parents of Bat Out of Hell, a number called What Part of My Body Hurts the Most. Rob studied the harmony, and I said, okay, Sharon, you can sing a third above that. No, I'll never. Yes, you can sing a third above that. Last night she said, it almost kind of changed my life because I suddenly sang it and thought, oh my goodness, I can do it. And it was one of the iconic moments in the show where they sing passionately in this song and they sing in harmony. They're both at the top of their range, belting out the song. And I was so thrilled. And I was thrilled last night that she said, do you remember when you said that? And I thought, I do, really.
I spoke to Rob and to Sharon and to Luke as well, Luke Street and Camilla Fernandez. You work with all of them. And I said, what would you say about Mike? I hope you don't mind. Because I'm speaking to you today. I'm just going to throw out some of the comments. So one was, he's the most humble genius. He's a one-man orchestra, humble, generous, supportive, kind. And then another one that I liked, and there were lots. He says some musical directors are quite rigid, whereas Mike allows you to find yourself and lets you fly, which I thought was a really nice compliment.
Well, that's lovely. I take that as a big compliment because that's exactly what I love to do.
Well, that's exactly what you're saying.
Oh, well, that's so nice that they said that. They're very special performers. Camilla's quite new. I saw Camilla perform in Guys and Dolls. Second time I saw it, I loved it so much. I went second time. She was on as Adelaide, and I was blown away by her. And I immediately got my business partner, who we were doing a workshop, and I said, please ask if she can do this workshop. And we did that in the summer. Asked her to do the concert at the church and then this as well. And she's so talented, so young. Goodness knows what the future is going to make. She could only go and rise into a big star. And Luke is wonderful. He's a super talent.
I wanted to ask you about Donny Osmond because when I was about 5 years old, he was my pretend friend, my imaginary
But
friend.
did you have a Donny Osmond pillow and all that kind of thing? No?
Well, no, I didn't, because I didn't need to, because as far as I was concerned, he was right next to me all the time.
He was right next to you anyhow.
Yeah. So my parents would open the car door for me and then shut it, and I'd say, "Oh no, Donny's in there."
Oh.
And then I'd have to open the car door and let Donny out. I wanted to marry Donny. That was my plan. But he then, after his teenage heartthrob years, had a lull, and you spotted him. How did you do that?
Well, I mean, we were doing a production of Joseph. Production we did in London, directed by Steve Pimler, who's sadly no longer with us, brilliant director, and Anthony Van Laas, choreographer. We were presented with a list of people of who was going to come in for the role of Joseph. They thought, oh, Donny Osmond. Literally a list of a whole lot of people, not going to, well, normally you would expect with someone like Donny, you'd have a separate meeting. It wouldn't be on a list. You'd have a pre-meeting if you got someone. But he was just up for just going because he didn't have anything going on, particularly at that time. When I heard him sing, I thought, no, this is wonderful. Absolutely the perfect voice. He looked amazing. Must have been a good 30 years ago. He was in great, great shape. And he sang like a god and was the nicest person. He said, listen, you've got to come back. We want to work with you. So I worked with him one-to-one and then said to Andrew, listen, we all loved him. So then he came on board. Hugely successful tour in Canada. Then when it came to the movie, we all said Donny would be great. And he was an absolute joy when we did the movie of it to work with. Easiest person, again, a man with absolutely no ego. Just wants to kind of do his best. And he's one of the few singers who I've never heard him sing out of tune. His sense of pitch is absolutely perfect because he did so much close harmony with the family. And I think he also did, I think he sang with Michael Jackson a lot as well. The kids, when they were, if I remember rightly, he can sing in a harmony and he can sing a really complex harmony line and just hold it perfectly in tune. Extraordinary vocal technique.
Sonia said that she was booked to do a session with him. And so they demoed the backing vocals and then he walked in and sang everything out of tune, like a semitone lower. And they were like, oh, Donny Osmond can't sing. And then he just turned around and laughed. And she said, do you have no idea how difficult it is to sing badly on purpose? But he just did it for a joke. And then, of course, he then nailed it. She also had only good things to say about it.
Well, he had a lovely sense of humour, which is always a delight when you're working with somebody. But I can imagine that Donny could sing a semitone under, absolutely a semitone under. He is just extraordinary in that way.
Glenn Close. So she's formidable. I've just seen her in the series called Tehran. She's been prolific on screen. How did she adapt to the theatre, to performing live? Because you did Sunset Boulevard with her. Sorry, I didn't explain.
But I actually met her, I think it was in 1980, when she was playing Mrs. Barnum on Broadway.
Oh.
And I was sent out by Harold Fielding to go and see the show before I conducted it, so I could get an idea of what it was and technically know what was needed and things like that. So when Jim Dale, who I'd worked with before in the car, he was out there playing Barnum, and Glenn was playing. And so I met her very, very briefly, and we talked about it when we worked together. Her start was in theatre.
Oh, I didn't realise that.
She started as a theatrical artist, and she had done that on Broadway, Sunset Boulevard. So she'd already played the role 25 years earlier. When I worked with her, she already knew it all. And she sang it in all the keys, I think, which were, she originally sang in. She was an extraordinary person to work with. And she would say it herself. She's not known to be a great singer. She doesn't do Glenn Close sings Broadway hits or albums or things like that. But my goodness, what she can do with a song and what she can do with a lyric. And her acting is sensational. When I was conducting, which I felt very privileged to do, I would watch her every night. And I could see her on my screen in front of me. When we did it at the E&O, the orchestra were on risers all at the back. And it was a concert version of Sunset, really, semi-staged. Every night it was like a lesson. And the audience just went absolutely crazy. I remember the final show. I remember Andrew coming backstage in tears saying, that was probably the best performance I've ever seen of Sunset. The best performance I've ever seen of any of my shows, he said.
Wow.
He was absolutely overwhelmed because it was so powerful. I think Glenn had something like 5 standing ovations before the interval. That the audience couldn't get enough of it. It's just so amazing how she performed that you really felt for her. It's a tricky one, Sunset. I love the show at the recent production of it. Absolutely.
Yes, I saw the recent production one.
Yeah, but she's so beautiful and quite young. And it makes it harder at the end to really feel for someone.
Yes.
But she managed to portray this faded star who kind of believed in herself and was kind of in her own mind, she was still 25. But at the end, when she's killed Joe Gillis, they say, you've got to come with us now. And she said, no, I'll wait, give you my spot. I still get tingles thinking about it every night. Oh, wow, this is incredible acting. I get emotional every night. I get emotional talking about it now. The control she had in those final moments of Sunset, I've never seen anything like it. It was just acting at its absolute highest. Just kind of tied everything in. And the kind of mad scene she does, it was a lesson in how to be a leading lady in a musical. And I think Nicole Scherzinger, I have to say, was absolutely at ease, unbelievable. And I love the way she did it, but it's a very different performance, really, because she is considerably younger, 30 years younger, probably. And I was left a little bit thinking in the interval of Sunset, well, why would he want to go and see this Betty Schaefer girl when he's got Nicole Scherzinger just there, wandering around in her 90, looking unbelievably sexy? You kind of think, well, okay.
Not so believable.
It's not so believable, but yet she kind of made it work for her brilliantly. Definitely right at the top of experiences I've had in the theatre with a star.
Writing. You've spent 10 years, at least, I think, working in Germany and Austria. Amongst other projects, you wrote a musical with Jim Steinman based on the life of Greta Garbo, and you wrote the score together. I was looking up Jim as well, and he's also a prolific composer and songwriter, and he masterminded Meatloaf's Bad Out of Hell, and then he did Bonnie Tyler's Total Eclipse of the Heart and Holding Out for a Hero. I love the song that you wrote, A Simple Time.
Oh, Simple Time.
Such a beautiful, beautiful song I have been listening to on repeat. How did you guys sort of complement each other?
Well, I met Jim initially through Andrew, and we were doing A Whistle Down the Wind, and Andrew brought him in to write the lyrics. And he and I just got on so well on every level. He loves going out to eat. He loves a good wine. He loves Wagner. He's absolutely passionate about Wagner. Huge influence on him, and loved opera generally. And we just had so much in common. While I was working on Whistle, he was asked by a theatre called Variety Taboon in Wien, which is the combined theatres of Vienna. It's got a state-run theatre there. Jim was asked to write the music for Dance of the Vampires, Tanz der Vampire, which Michael Kunz was writing the lyrics, and Roman Polanski was going to direct it. So Jim said, would I work with him on it? And would I get the music together, get someone to orchestrate it and do all the arrangements and everything like that? I said, of course I will, I'd love to. And that to this day is still running. That's finished just in Hamburg. It's been on ever since it opened in 1997, 24 years, on pretty well every year. And it's a huge hit everywhere it goes. So it's been by retirement policy, that one. And it was a joy to work with Jim on it. I mean, there's a whole podcast just on that. We've got the 30th anniversary coming up, and I'm trying to get a coffee book together with all the stories and the histories. It's been everywhere. New York with Michael Crawford. It's been in Russia, been in Japan. It's been all over Europe, in Poland and in Hungary and in Scandinavian countries. I mean, it's just been a huge success. And it's a really fun piece. I'm desperately trying to get it in London because I think it could be a huge show in London, Dance of the Vampires, especially with vampire culture.
I know, everyone's obsessed with vampires right now.
But this is kind of based on Roman's film. Roman's got the most incredible sense of humour as well, has an incredible eye and an amazing filmmaker and director. I really would love to try and get it on in London. It doesn't need to be a huge production. It's a very passionate show in many ways, but it also is quite very, very funny. It's a bit crazy. I think it could be a real cult musical.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to find the right producer who can do it. I'll be onto it to try and get it on here. It was a joy working with Jim. And I was asked by a Swedish producer if I would come in and work on a show about Garbo. So I suggested to Jim, I said, would you write the score? And he said, oh, I'd love to do that. So he wrote half the score, and I wrote half the score, and a friend of mine called Warner Brown, a dear friend, wrote the lyrics for both of us. But I went over to New York and worked with Jim on all his songs and spent time with him, which is always interesting with Jim, because Jim is like a vampire, because he goes to bed around about 8 or 9 in the morning and then gets up around about 5, or used to get up 5 or 6 in the afternoon.
Wow, he really is a vampire.
So yeah, when you're working with Jim, I used to have to get onto Jim's kind of shift, really. He used to have a room in Trump Towers, in New York in the hotel there. So I'd go and visit him there. It was always a joy. I miss him a lot to this day, really. So we worked together on that. And then he asked if I would do Bat Out of Hell with him and the musical. And then I developed that, all the songs with him. And so even though he's gone, which is a huge loss on so many levels, he's always in my life nearly every day, really. Because I'm always having to deal with either Dance of the Vampires, or at the moment we're talking about getting a production of Garbo on in Germany. So I have a German agent who is looking into that, which would be lovely. And then, of course, Bat Out of Hell started rehearsals last week, and we open in Edinburgh in the new year.
When's it coming to London? Because I'm wondering when
it's coming to London the end of May, beginning of June. It's 3 weeks at the Peacock Theatre. And it's also in Bromley, I think, at the end of January. I think Jim is one of the most talented composers I've worked with, actually. He is extraordinary. His songs always go on for ages. I remember when we did Dance of the Vampires originally, the show lasted nearly 3.5 hours. It was so long because every number lasted about 10 minutes. You listen to Jim's songs like Bat Out of Hell or Anything for Love. They're all 8-9 minutes long.
But they're so good that you don't mind listening for that length of time. It's kind of...
Sometimes in the theatre you have to cut. And I'd say to Jim, we have to... It was like, I'd say I'm going to cut his arm off or something like that. I'm going to cut one of your toes off. It was like, no, you can't. I don't want to cut it. I don't want to cut it. And in the end, we said, no, we have to cut it down a bit. We can't have a show which goes on longer than 3 hours for so many reasons. Most of all, you have to pay the orchestra half an hour overtime every night. We'll never make the money back on the show. No. So in the end, we got the show, I think, down to about 2 hours 40. I brought Rob in last year. We did a production in Hamburg, and he played it, the lead of Dance of the Vampires, unbelievably, really, because he's fluent in German, because he's quite a big star in Germany. He was wonderful singing it. So if ever you get the chance to see that show with Rob singing it, I would recommend it.
I will look out for it, for sure. He was amazing last night, and he had bronchitis. How can you possibly have a voice like that when you're unwell?
Well, 2 days ago, I spoke to him. I thought, goodness, it doesn't sound good. Oh, Lord, what's happening here? But fortunately, singing A Fairy Tale of New York, the rougher you sound,
you can sound good. It's all right.
It sounds kind of like that's how it should be, really, authentic.
Conducting. You have been a guest conductor with most of the leading orchestras in the UK, Royal Philharmonic, London Symphony, BBC concert orchestras. You're also a frequent contributor for BBC Radio 2. You've conducted live concerts and also many of the BBC Radio 2 complete musical recordings, Guys and Dolls, A Little Night Music, Jesus Christ Superstar. I mean, there's so many things that you're doing. Of all of the different things that you do, which do you enjoy the most?
I love conducting shows. And I love that whole thing of bringing actors and musicians together. And playing the piano is something which is always important to me. I love playing the piano. I love doing concerts with people. I love developing music via the piano. I don't know I really want to make a choice. I guess if I had to, I don't know. Probably playing the piano is the thing I love doing. I love getting new shows together and developing new shows and building them up and seeing them grow from early stems. It's like planting seeds, and then you can see everything beginning to work and coming together and making a beautiful tapestry of things. And to me, that's one of the most satisfying things. When you get to the end of a journey, you sit there the first night and you think, okay, this is working. The audience are loving it and the box office is thriving. And I've been lucky enough, especially in Germany and Austria, to have some big successes. And I'm very proud of that. So that's definitely something I've really enjoyed doing.
Is there one particular moment you could point to and say that was a sublime moment?
The opening night of Phantom had to be up there because that just took off like a rocket. It had some good rehearsals, we had some good previews. But actually the first night was like when you're sailing and you've got the wind in your sails and you're just effortlessly going down across the ocean. That was definitely one of them. Also Sunset, definitely up there, especially the last night was one of the most incredible moments. And I remember conducting it and almost having an out-of-body experience and just thinking, this is incredible. I'm working with such amazing people, a fantastic orchestra, the E&O, doing a show which I'm really loving it. That was very special. West Side Story, I remember being in tears every night conducting that. So emotional. That was a joy, and I would love to do West Side Story again. I think those three. But then there have been some amazing recitals and play music when it's very special. During the pandemic with Ben and Bear, we played quite a lot of music. When we were allowed to meet up, we would meet up, they'd come to my place and we'd play. And we recorded the Beethoven Archduke Trio, which is a tricky piece. I practiced every day during the pandemic because I was on my own living in my flat. And the piano became like my best friend, really. And so I practiced more in the pandemic, I think, than I ever did when I was a student. So I was in reasonably good shape. But the Beethoven Archduke Trio is really hard. And we recorded that, and that's a highlight. I have an orchestra in Cornwall, which I conduct, called the Cornish Symphonia, and we recorded a concert of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony. And they're a mixture of semi-professional. That was a fantastic experience because people hadn't played for so long because of the pandemic, and all of a sudden they were together almost for the first time. And they just played their hearts out. And I was just passionately conducting Beethoven, who's one of my favorite composers. And it was an amazing result, really. We've got quite a special recording. It's not flawless, but Lord, it flies, and there's a lot of passion.
Those are wonderful. What about a disaster? Has that ever happened to you? We talked about the near disaster with Michael Crawford, the drummer.
Oh, yeah. Another one in Phantom was great. I'm not sure if you remember Music of the Night, when they're in the boat going round and round on the stage and things like that. Something happened with the remote control. It got completely out of control. And Michael was coming in, and I was like, stop.
Well, it's coming towards you.
The pit. Yes, straight towards me. It's meant to be kind of doing this and going round like this. And all of a sudden, none of that. It was just like coming straight towards the end of the pit. That was a bit difficult.
Did it tip in?
They didn't in the end. They managed to, Michael had to get out the boat and push it or something. But I did say, listen, stop. It's just not going well. You have to get out and so I think he did. I think he ended up pushing Sarah around the stage to safety. One of the earliest disasters I think I had, it was in a church when I was a student. I used to do these crazy concerts. And one of them, I used to get hold of my mates together and we'd get a little orchestra. I did a kind of version of 1812 Overture with the vicar of this particular church in St. John's, Upper Holloway. And I was choir master. So we were doing this. And he said, listen, we can do all the effects at the end with the bells and things and the cannons. I'll hit my mic like this. And then why don't we get a whole load of pots and pans and things like this? When we get to the end, we can have the bells of St. Petersburg playing out. I thought, that sounds a wonderful idea, Vicar. Okay, let's do it. So we got to the rehearsals. The first time they hit this pan, the whole lot fell down, landed on the choir, just this dreadful sound like you've never heard. It was a bit, so that was the end, and we had one thump and no more bells for the rest of it. It like slightly spoiled the end of the number. There have been a few moments, really, but nothing completely disastrous.
How do you think about the future of theatre and live performing art? Are you optimistic?
I'm totally optimistic. I think in many ways, computers and synthesizers and things you can do in films are now very much part of music. And I think we've embraced it. When I was a student, everyone was terrified about synthesizers, and there were a union with banning synthesizers. In orchestra pits, you weren't allowed to have them unless you could explain exactly what they were being used for. And if they were going to be putting musicians out of work, they weren't allowed. Well, I supported all that. But now we integrate it. And I think it's very exciting. But I think we'll never ever lose live music. If you just put a track on, it's not the same thing as someone just singing karaoke. You just need to have Tony playing guitar brilliantly. You'll never be able to recreate. This is a one-off experience. It's not like on a track you can play it every night. It's going to sound the same. No, every night he would come out and do something a bit different. And all those people singing, this live music, you cannot beat it. Whether it's a philharmonic orchestra or whether it's a pianist or a jazz guitarist or whatever. And I think music will always flourish. I think theatre is a very interesting stage at the moment. We've had a lot of what I call jukebox musicals. They're great. People love them, and that's great. I would love to see theatre getting back to being original works like Phantom, new scores. And I'm thrilled to see that. And Andrew's doing his new musical, The Illusionist. I think it's a great story. Hopefully that's going to be back to the form he had on Phantom. If he can create something like that again, I think it'd be wonderful. And I think, to me, that's what I love about theatre. I mean, I think jukebox musicals do have a place, and they are great. But I love, especially like with the Sondheim musicals, such original pieces with an original book and an original score. And I love going to the theatre and hearing something brand new. That's, to me, is very special. So I think we're going back that way again now, which is great. Theatre always goes through phases, like films go through phases. You have vampire films or horror films. I think we're in good shape. And it's nice to see that, we still have reasonably good sized orchestras in the West End. We're not playing to track or something like that. I don't think that will ever happen, not in general. And occasionally you get something where they have a track, and it's for some things because it has to be like that. But live musicians and actors in the theatre doesn't get better than that.
Research shows there are many things that music does. Among them is it raises your mood, it helps you heal, it helps you chill out, helps keep us young. They've conducted studies and it can also make you more successful. So not only have you given all of us this wonderful entertainment, but you're also helping us in all these other areas as well. I had a friend of mine who recently said, "What is your purpose, Katie? What are you on earth to do?" And I haven't figured that out at all. But you have, and you have done it so well. So I just wanted to say thank you. And thank you for being here today. Thank you for all you've done, all the joy and entertainment and laughter and tears you've given us. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's been a joy talking to you. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, Katie.
You've been listening to Bandwidth Conversations. Thanks to Anna B, Head of Marketing, to all at the podcast consultant, to Bagawai for the music, to the Money Maze podcast. Thank you for listening. Any feedback, please email me, katie@bandwidthconversations.com. Please sign up on our website, www.bandwidthconversations.com, so we can notify you about new podcast releases. We hope to see you again soon.